So welcome to my third extract from my novel Kiss from a Rose. This extract comes from the chapter entitled "Do not watch the petal fall from the rose with sadness. Know that, like life, things sometimes must fade before they can bloom again." And it talks about the most difficult part of my journey, which was when my hair fell out. And I think having cancer at the age of 16 was probably a far too big a concept for me to really take in until my hair fell out. And then it's very physical. People can see that you're ill. People can see that there's something wrong. So here is what I wrote about it. As the weeks throughout my treatment passed, I could feel strands of hair falling out. It felt like a kick to the stomach the first time I ran my fingers through my hair and was left with a bundle of it in my hand. I tried to convince myself that it was no more than what might normally come out when you ruffle your hair, but I knew deep down it was really happening now. I prayed that this would be it, just a few strands here and there. That way perhaps at least I'd be able to cover up any small gaps with the rest of my hair. I prayed every day that it wouldn't fall out, and for a while, to my relief, it was just a few strands here and there. I remember getting ready to go to church one Sunday. I was absolutely terrified to wash my hair before we went. I knew it wouldn't be long now, and I had an awful feeling that as soon as I lay back in the bath, it would all fall out at once. I wasn't ready, but in the same breath, I knew I would never be ready for this. There would never be a right time to lose my hair, to be bald, and I hated it. I felt angry, and I felt robbed of a normal life. I massaged the shampoo and conditioner into my hair so gently and took my time washing it out. I panicked when I felt strands coming out in my hands, and as I lay in the bath, I stared at them floating on the water's surface. It took a couple of hours in all to wash, comb, and blow dry my hair, for what turned out to be the last time. I wanted so badly to show everyone that I was still beautiful. I wanted people to remember me as Natasha, and not, that girl with cancer. So I carefully finished styling my hair and put on a dress. It was purple with pink and gold lining, knee-length and gorgeous. I left the house with my head held high. Mum and I got into my little metro, and she drove the 5-minute journey to church. After the service, I spoke to some friends, and everyone said how well I looked, but inside I was crumbling. The more I touched my head throughout the service, the more hair came out in my hands, but I managed to keep myself together until I got home. My eyes filled with tears as I showed my mum how easily my hair was now falling out, but what could she say to me? She just held me as tears fell down my cheeks. We snuggled on the sofa that evening as the reality of what this treatment was really doing to me started to hit home. That night I felt really ill. I lay in bed and could feel my temperature rising. My throat hurt, and I was getting more and more irritable. Suddenly I started to really shiver. I had gone from burning up to feeling absolutely freezing, but was still sweating at the same time. I lay shuddering under my covers as I called for my mum. As she came into my room, I asked her to put the heating on. I couldn't understand how the temperature in the house could have dropped so quickly. My teeth were chattering as I spoke to her. Mum tucked me into bed tightly and went to make me a cup of tea to warm me up. She knew something must have been wrong, as she hadn't noticed a change in the temperature, and yet I was obviously so cold. When she came back with the tea, she had a thermometer with her as well. The hospital told us that anything between 36 degrees and 37 was normal, and to get in touch with the hospital if it was any different. Expecting it to be lower than 36 degrees because I was shivering so much, we were both shocked when the tiny screen on the side of the thermometer read 39.9. Mum was so confused. How could I be so cold yet have a reading that was so high? So she phoned my Macmillan nurse. What a lifeline those nurses were. Call any time you need us, they told us when we were first introduced at the beginning of my treatment. And that night at 3 a.m, they were at the end of the phone immediately, just as they had promised. They explained that the high temperature reading indicated that I had a bad infection, but I was shivering so violently because it's the body's way of trying to cool itself down. They told Mum to get me to the hospital immediately, not to wait for an ambulance, but to take me there herself, as it would be quicker. They also told her to take all the bedclothes off me, as I needed to shiver to cool myself down. My poor Mum, she hung up the phone, grabbed a bag and threw some pyjamas in, a toothbrush and some underwear as well. She then came into my room and explained that we had to go to the hospital quickly, helping me out of bed and down the stairs to the car as she spoke. I was trying to take the duvet with me, but Mum was gently pulling it away, following the advice the nurse had given her. So we fought with the bed covers all the way down the stairs to the car until we compromised, and she gave me a small blanket as I sat in the front seat shaking with the cold. We arrived at Queen Mary's A&E department with me drifting in and out of sleep. Because I was neutropenic, the hospital staff were quick to rush me to a ward where they gave me a room to myself. My immune system was now so low and I was very vulnerable to infections. I couldn't risk being on a ward with other patients, and so again I needed to be in isolation. Throughout the night and during the following day, many blood tests and scans were carried out on me. Quite often, when a patient develops an infection as a result of being on chemo, doctors are unable to identify the exact cause of the infection. However, a large dose of antibiotics is usually enough to calm down any symptoms and help the infection pass. On this occasion, though, the doctors were unable to identify the problem, and the antibiotics they had administered were having absolutely no effect. My heart was racing, and the hospital staff were becoming increasingly concerned throughout the day as more medication proved unsuccessful. But they kept trying, doing more and more blood tests and giving me more and more antibiotics in an attempt to calm the infection symptoms down. Eventually, they discovered I had meningitis. They diagnosed it just in time before it was able to cause any serious permanent damage. I knew from the reaction of the doctors things were bad. Their sense of urgency was frightening, no matter how hard they tried to cover it up. I also knew that if Mum had left it until the morning to call the nurse and tuck me in tightly for the night, things would be very different now. So once again, she had saved my life. Finally, on the correct medication, I was comfortable enough to sleep for the rest of the day. Family came and went. They brought tea and fruit with them for Mum and tried to persuade her to go home with them to get some rest now that I was getting a bit better. But she stayed by my side, staring at the four walls and refusing to leave until I woke the following morning. I woke feeling so much better. I felt refreshed and relieved to be neither sweating nor shivering. Mum asked me if I fancied something small to eat. My mouth was in agony from all the tiny little cuts that had developed around my gums, but I was so hungry I asked for anything she could find that was soft. So she popped downstairs for some fresh air, a couple of bananas for us, and some more magazines. While I waited, my head still cushioned by a few pillows, I switched the TV on at the bottom of the bed and relaxed. Being on chemotherapy caused my concentration span to become quite short, and I was finding it hard to focus on one programme for more than 15 minutes, so I put the music channels on instead. Watching the sexy young pop stars do their thing on screen, I found myself singing along to the music videos. To my amazement, I realised the chemo had also affected my voice. I could hear myself croaking along to the songs and found I wasn't able to reach notes as high as I normally could. Just something else I would have to get used to, I thought to myself. Soon Mum returned with some goodies, and although I was still a bit weak, I pulled myself up in the bed so that I could sit up straight and talk to her. It was a struggle though. My back and bum were really aching from lying down so much. As I sat up and reached for a banana in the bag Mum had put at the end of my bed, her face fell. She was staring at me and her eyes started to fill with tears. "Honey," she said, "your hair." I put my hand to my head and could feel my bare scalp. I turned in the bed to see that my hair had remained on the pillow as I sat up. It was that quick. I was speechless. I was still holding my head and staring at the pillow as the cleaner walked into the room, whistling and sweeping the floor as he entered. "Don't worry, love," he sang to me. "It'll grow back." I just sat and stared at him with my mouth open, my hand resting on the bare skin where my long auburn hair should have been. He left as quickly as he came in, leaving Mum and I just looking at each other. She came over to me and sat next to me on the bed, and she held me and rocked me as I cried on her shoulder. She held me like I was her little girl again, at what was probably the lowest moment of my treatment. What could she say to me now? What could she do? Kiss me on the forehead and make it all better again? I pulled away from her and stood up next to the bed. I walked over to the sink in the corner of the room, which had a mirror fixed to the wall above it. So there I was, face to face with my nightmare. The one thing that had haunted me since the day I had been diagnosed. Other than a few wispy strands left at the back of my head and behind the tops of my ears, I was bald. Looking back, perhaps it had been a good thing that it all fell out at once. At least this way I hadn't gone through the torment that some experienced of it thinning and fading away, and neither did I have to make the tough decision of shaving it off if a large patch had appeared. It was still hard though, my toughest battle. The most painful thorn on my rose had well and truly stung.